Guys, I come back with the other part of the Germino Stilton, A Very Merry Christmas. So, yesterday I read this part. So today I will read this part. A yellow bag with a bright blue tag. After a long bumpy flight, we finally landed at New York's Kennedy Airport. And not a moment too soon, as far as I concerned. My paws were so cramped and stiff, I felt like I'd been stuffed inside a thin tin of miniature cheese snacks. It was morning. The airport was already crowded and incredibly busy. There were tons of rodents scurrying about all over the place. Some had just arrived and others were about to depart. Everyone was in a hurry to get somewhere. After waiting in the long line to get to the immigration counter to have my passport stamped, I headed for the baggage claim area to retrieve my suitcase from Miles Air, the official airline of Mouse Island. I couldn't wait to get my bag. I was already looking forward to a nice warm bath and something cheesy to munch on the McMouse's apartment. I was so tired from the long flight, I felt like I was going to fall asleep on my paws. I kept yawning. When I saw a yellow bag with a bright blue tag on the baggage casserole, and I got second wind. I grabbed it and headed for the exit. At the check-in counter, I checked my yellow bag with Mouse Air. There was a bag, the conveyor belt. It's about to be loaded onto the airplane that will take me to New York. At 9 p.m., my phone takes off. At 6 a.m., my plane landed at Kennedy Airport in New York. Exhausted from long trip, I grabbed the yellow bag from the casserole. I headed for the exit with the yellow bag. This isn't my bag. Outside the airport, it was snowing. I hailed a taxi. Then I loaded my suitcase into the trunk and gave the driver the McMouse's address in Manhattan. Halfway into the city, I realized I didn't have a wallet on me. Holy jeez, I only had my passport and the New York City tourist guide in my pocket. I must have left my wallet inside my suitcase. I asked the cab driver to pull over. He popped the trunk and took out the yellow bag. Then, when I opened it, I had a big surprise. Christy Kitty Litter, this wasn't my bag. Where were all my clothes? The Christmas gifts for the McMouse were missing. If I didn't find those gifts, I'd be cheese toast. Grandfather William will make sure of it. Oh no, this isn't my bag, I cried. The cab driver shrugged. That's your problem, not mine. I just want my money. But I don't have a penny on me. My wallet is on my bag, I shrieked. Since I didn't have any money, the cabbie demanded my beloved gold fountain pen as payment. I didn't dare complain. He was so huge, he looked like a small rat with massive muscles that looked even bigger when he was mad. He snatched the pen from my paw and climbed back on his cab, slamming the door behind him. The cab zoomed away, leaving skid marks. Behind it, it wasn't until it had disappeared from sight that I realized I was stranded on the highway. I stood on the side of the road in the snow. I was halfway between the airport and Manhattan. I was miles from home. I was exhausted. I had no money. I had a humongous bag to lug around, and it wasn't even mine. Mrs. Smith's suitcase. I sat at the edge of the highway. I couldn't even make a phone call. I left my cell phone inside my bag. I wanted to cry, but I stood up and straightened my tail. There was only one thing to do. I had to get the bag back to its owner and hope that he or she had my bag. It couldn't be that hard, could it? I took a better look at the bag. It was yellow, just like mine, with a bright blue tag, just like mine. The tag had a name on it, Mrs. A. Smith. Moldy mozzarella. Smith? That had to be the most common name in New York City. There were bound to be hundreds of Smiths. Inside the suitcase, there were dresses, makeovers, makeup, and pantyhose. There were also a lot of books and several notebooks filled with notes on ancient Egypt, plus an x-ray of a mummy. The rodent who had taken my luggage was an Egyptologist, that is, someone who studies ancient Egyptian civilization. Suddenly, I heard ringing from inside the bag. Ring, 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 ring. I grabbed my bag and started digging through it. At the bottom was a cell phone. Could the rodent whose bag I'd taken by accident be calling me? There was only one way to find out. I answered the phone. Hello, is this Mrs. Smith? This is Stilton, Germino Stilton. Yes, this is Mrs. Smith. A female mouse's voice replied. I have your bag, I informed her. Well, she probably realized it. How else could I have answered her phone? And I have yours, she chimed. I'll meet you at the rat munching rattlesnakes. The phone had gone dead. Tears of frustration had exhaustion rolled down my snout. As you know, dear reader, I've had a lot of adventures, but this was turning out to be the most unlucky one yet. After a moment or two, I wiped my eyes. Then I started going through Mrs. Smith's bag. I felt guilty. I never looked through other mice's things. But this was different. It was an emergency. In one of the side pockets, I found something that might help me. Mrs. Smith's appointment book. This is what she had planned for the day. When the phone cut off, Mrs. Smith was saying she must have been saying Columbia University. She had an appointment there at 10 o'clock. If I got there in time, maybe we could exchange bags. Then I'd get to Magmouse's Christmas gifts back. And grandfather would never have to know what had happened. Well, was I a millipede or a mouse? I could do it. I had to. headlights in the fog. Shivering from the cold, I put on paw in front of the other. I had to get to Manhattan. Cars whizzed by me, coming a little closer. That I liked. Road and Sur seems to drive much faster than they did in New Mouse City. In the morning fog, the yellow headlight glimmered like cat's eyes. It was terrifying. But cold and miserable as I was still fascinated by what I saw around me. New York was truly an extraordinary place. The city never slept. It was in a state of constant motion. The snow had stopped. I dragged the yellow bag behind me like a sack of moldy cheese rings. It left a trail through the brown slush on the side of the road. I kept sleeping, but I continued to my way. What else could I do? I considered going to McMouse's for help, but I was too embarrassed. No way I can tell grandfather I lost the gifts. I panted as I stepped into a puddle of slush. My fur was gray and patchy before I hear the end of it. When I got to Manhattan, I looked like I'd gone paw to claw with an oversized tabby. I was covered with mud from snout to shoe. I was soaked to the bone. I felt as if I hadn't slept in a week. I hadn't eaten in hours, and I didn't have a penny to my name. My map was so wet and dirty, it was falling apart. But as I looked around me, I couldn't help thinking, holy cheese, what a beautiful city. Too many Smiths. I started walking uptown. I still didn't have a cent for the subway. It was just my luck that Columbia was the northern end of Manhattan, and I was at the southern end. But when I finished a long trip, it was worth it. What a gorgeous university! Everywhere I looked, there were students bustling about. They looked so studious and so serious. I turned to a mouse with fur the color of ebony and said, "Good morning, Miss May. I ask you a question?" "Of course," she answered pleasantly. "I'm not quite sure if I can help you, but try me. I'm a professor here. What would you like me to know?" Columbia University. Columbia University was founded in 1754 as King's College by the order of King George II of England. It is one of the oldest and most prestigious universities in America. Today, it is mostly known for its schools of law, medicine, and journalism. "Well, I'm looking for Miss Smith," I began. The professor laughed. "Smith? Do you realize that's the most common name in the United States?" "Yes," I answered. "Tell me her first name," the professor suggested. "Maybe that will help." I don't know it," I confessed. "I only know that it starts with an A." She shook her head. "Like Anna or Anastasia? How about Anita or Ada? Maybe Adelaide?" Have you any idea how many A. Smith or there are at this university? Where are you from? I can tell you're not a New Yorker. Yes, I know it's going to be hard finding her, I mumbled. You see, I was at the airport and I took her bag by accident. She has my bag with all my money and my cell phone. I hadn't slept or washed or eaten. It was then I started sobbing. I started to stop myself, but I couldn't. I was just so tired. The professor took pity on me. She offered me a cup of hot cheese and pointed me to a bathroom where I could wash my paws and face. Before she said goodbye, she gave me a new map of the city. Good luck finding her, she said. You'll need it. I looked over Mrs. Smith's appointment book and decided to look for her next appointment, 11 o'clock at the Empire State Building. Unfortunately, it was nowhere near Columbia. How was I ever going to there on time? I had only an hour and lots of ground to cover. Up in the Empire State Building. I walked and walked. It seemed like I'd be walking forever. My paws are so cold and sore they'd gone up. Just when I thought I couldn't take another step, I saw a skateboard peeking out of a garbage can. That gave me a brilliant idea. I put the skateboard on the ground and placed my one paw on it to see if it held. I could probably use this, I muttered, but I didn't get a chance to finish my thought. Another rodent on the sidewalk accidentally bumped into me, and the next thing I knew, I was racing along like a hamster on a treadmill. I zoomed through the crowds of the New Yorkers screaming, "Help! Get out of the way!" I was whizzing down Broadway, the biggest and most famous street in old New York. The street seems to go on forever. At last, I came to 34th Street. Somehow I managed to hang a left. Now I was speeding towards Fifth Avenue. I skidded to a halt. Phew! I had made it to the Empire State Building without a scratch. I tried to blend into a crowd of tourists going up to the observatory. The elevator took us up to the 86th floor. When we went so high I could feel my ears popping. Cheese niblets, I hate heights. But when I scurried out onto the observation deck, I was stunned. The view left me absolutely breathless. What a magnificent panorama of the city. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to stop and enjoy the sights. I had to look for Miss Smith. I saw a mouse with a green jacket and asked, "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Smith?" She shook her snout. Then the next rodent I asked pinched my cheek. "No, I'm not Mrs. Smith. But if you want to call me, you can, my little cutie patootie." "I'm sorry," I stammered. There's been a mistake." There had to be a faster way to find her, so I took a deep breath and shouted, "Mrs. Smith!" Everybody stared at me. I could hear them murmuring, "You can tell he's not a New Yorker." A security guard grabbed me by the ear and dragged me downstairs. Watch the tail. I pulled out Mrs. Smith's appointment book and looked at my watch. The next appointment was at noon in Times Square. If I hurry, I could still make it. I was too fond of my Ford to set a paw on that skateboard again. Fortunately for my sore paws, Times Square was not too far from the Empire State Building. I could find myself in a beautiful square filled with neon lights, billboards, skyscrapers, and theater markets. Holy cheese, that square was so bright I wished I had sunglasses. I stood still for a moment, trying to catch my breath. I was right outside the fancy hotel with big glass doors. Suddenly, two rodents with smart blue uniforms came rushing out. As they unrolled a long red carpet, they shouted to each other, "Hurry up, will you? She's coming." I tried asking, "She? Who's come?" But the red carpet knocked me out of my paws. I found myself now down on the pavement as the two dormice rolled the carpet right over my back. A beautiful blonde rodent stepped out a long, shiny limousine. Within seconds, a huge crowd and formed. "That's her! It's really her! Marcelina!" someone shouted. The rodents walked slowly along the red carpet, smiling and signing autographs. She was about to step on me, so I said, "Watch the tail." I meant my tail, but she looked behind her and saw that the tail of her long, elegant gown was caught in the door of the limousine. She smiled and planted a kiss on my cheek. Then she gave me the red rose she was holding. "Thank you. You're my hero." What pushy paws! In a second, the crowd was swarming all over me like a pack of hungry rats at an all-you-can-eat cheese buffet. Everyone was trying to grab my rose. "It's mine! I saw it first! I'm her biggest fan! It's mine!" they squealed. I had to protect myself. These New York mice are such pushy pals, so I let two dormice roll up in carpet. Then I took me safely into the hotel. As I scrambled out, I could hear the crowds muttering angrily. I didn't have time to worry about what a bunch of crazy retirancy thought of me. I was a mouse on a mission, but I realized that in all the confusion, I'd missed my chance to find Mrs. Smith's cheese slice. Locating Mrs. Smith was turning out to be easy, and striking down the latest Nintendo game on Christmas Eve. If I had any hope of finding her, I'd have to hurry to her next appointment, 1 o'clock at Rockefeller Center. I was late. I raced along like a hungry cat at my heels. My paws ached, my back was sore, and my heart was beating so fast it sounded like one of those bongo drummers back in Times Square. Even so, I arrived at Rockefeller Center 10 minutes late. Panting, I collapsed on top of Mrs. Smith's yellow bag. I had to sit down before my paws gave out. When I looked up, I saw the hugest, most fat-mouthed Christmas tree ever. It was set above a beautiful skating rink crowded with rodents of every age, shape, and fur color. They are all bottled up in heavy parkas and colorful hats. Mrs. Smith, are you here? I shouted to the crowd. Mrs. Smith? No one answered. The fright of a lifetime. I looked at my watch. It was later than I thought. Mrs. Smith must already be on her way to next appointment, 2 o'clock at the American Museum of Natural History. I signed and picked up the yellow bag. Then, with a head hanging and my tail dragging between my legs, I headed towards the museum. When I arrived, I realized I had a big problem. I didn't have any money for the entrance fee. I almost cried, but then I caught a break. Right near the museum's front door stood a cleaning cart. I hid the bag towards a plant, then scrambled inside the garbage can. A few moments later, a cleaning mouse wheeled me inside the museum. I waited patiently while we clattered along. Then, as soon as it was safe to stick my snout out of the bin, I took a peek outside and got a fright of my life. An enormous squirrel was staring at me. It was the hugest dinosaur skeleton I have ever seen. I screeched and scurried out of the garbage can. I scrambled into the next room and raised my head to see an enormous whale that looked like if it was about to fall on top of me. I just couldn't take it anymore. Not in my wicked, hungry state. I fainted. A member of the museum staff received me with extra stinky, smelly cheeses. Are you okay, sir? She asked. I nodded quickly. Some mice do find our dinosaur bones and model whale a little overwhelming, she said kindly. Dinosaur bones? Model whale? Of course! This was a natural history museum. After all, I should have realized they weren't real. I didn't know if I could go on. I was exhausted. But I couldn't give up now. I had to prove myself. If I didn't get those gifts back, Grandfather would never let me forget it. I retrieved the yellow bag and strode out of the museum with my snout held high. I checked the time. I could still make it to the next appointment if I hurried. I hailed a taxi and offered the driver my gold watch in exchange for the ride to Brooklyn Bridge and stamped on it. I am in a hurry, I told him. The cab driver took off like a cab burglar fleeing the scene of crime. Here we go! He shouted. I felt like I was trapped in a race car. Red Racer 3000 video game. After 10 minutes, I was pale as death. Fine. After 20 minutes, I was as green as broccoli. After 30 minutes, After 30 minutes, I rolled down the window and lost my cheese. Arg, eck. Thanks to the cabby's crazy driving, we had already arrived at the Brooklyn Bridge. What a magnificent sight! It was the most beautiful bridge I'd ever seen. It was easy to understand why it was so famous. As I headed towards the pedestrian path, I noticed the long steel cables supporting the bridge. It was terrifying. What if one of the support cables snaps? I thought, getting panicky. What if one of the planks crumbles? What if a hurricane comes sweeping by? I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed at the top of my lungs, "Mrs. Smith, where are you?" All the rodents on the bridge stared at me disapprovingly. Fortunately for me, a big group of tourists arrived at the exact moment, desperate to avoid the straight stares of everyone around me. I hustled to the middle of the group. I was so humiliated. I turned red from my tip of my snout to end of my tail. In fact, I set a new world record for most embarrassing moments in a single day. Oh, how I wished I was back in my nice, cozy mouse hole with a nice cup of hot cheese by my side. For once on this awful day, I had a stroke of luck. The tourists were heading towards the ferry and sailed to the Statue of Liberty. That was where Mrs. Smith was heading for her next appointment. But of course, I still didn't have any money to pay my fare. All I had in my pocket was a button and an old crust of cheese. So I went to ferry's captain, a huge rodent with paws as big as the cat's, and told him I didn't have money for the ticket, but that I desperately needed to the Liberty Island. The captain looked at me appraisingly. "You don't, huh? Well, let's see what we can do with you." The captain rubbed my paws together in anticipation. "I've got it. Take that oversized mop and start scrubbing the deck. Make it shine. If I'm totally satisfied, I'll pay you for the ticket to get to the Statue of Liberty." He smiled down at me. "Today's your lucky day." "I'll do it," I told Captain. I picked up the mop and began to sweep the deck. A few minutes later, I looked up from my work. There she was. The famous Lady Liberty was emerging through the fog. When I finished cleaning the deck was as shiny as the top of another famous New York monument, the Chrysler Building. The captain must have been pleased because he gave me a friendly pat on the back and almost dislocated my shoulder. "This is America, young man. Go, climb the statue, and look to your future." I decided to follow his advice. I disembarked and headed towards the statue. She was even more beautiful close up. With a yellow bag in tow, I got it in line for elevator that would take me up to the base of the statue to Lady Liberty's feet. And holy cheese, was the line long. It seems like every rodent in New York City was in line with me. I would be waiting for hours to get an elevator and to the top. Without my gold pocket watch, I had no idea what time it was. "Excuse me, do you have the time?" I asked the rodent standing behind me. "It's 3:30, she replied. Moldy mozzarella. Mrs. Smith had probably come and gone. I let out a squeak of frustration. Would I see my bag again? There was only one way to find out. I had to make it to Central Park by 4 p.m. Central Park. I can't begin to tell you what I had to do to get back to Manhattan. First, I had to scrub my deck of the ferry again. Then I slugged along through the wet, heavy snow. My paws are so sore, they looked like they'd gone to a cheese grater. I paused on a street corner to catch my breath. I was so tired I had to use the yellow suitcase to support myself. A sanitation worker took pity on me and offered me a ride uptown on the back of his garage truck. I couldn't afford to be choosy, so I pinched my nose and scurried on board. What a stench! I got to Central Park on time, but I smelled like a garbage can. I had to find Mrs. Smith here. I just have to. Then I'd finally be able to go to the McMouse's apartment and relax. I started daydreaming about how my relatives would happily welcome me. I'd take a nice hot bubble bath. I'd eat some delicious, warm food. Unfortunately, I was so busy daydreaming, I forgot to look where I was going. Before you could say visions of cheese puffs, I was trampled by a group of runners. As they stomped on my aching tail, I heard them say, "Who's that? What's he doing block the road like that?" You can tell he's not a New Yorker. I was too weary and numb to feel a thing. My last thought was, holy jeez, the New Yorkers are tough. They jog in the snow. Then, for the second time that day, I fainted. On the streets of New York. When I came to, I was all alone. It was getting dark. The path in Central Park was deserted. I had lost my last chance to find Mrs. Smith. Digested, depressed, and despondent, Emily Slay wandered the streets of New York. The city looked like a fairyland, with Christmas lights everywhere tinkling against a blanket of new snow. Rodents everywhere were shouting Merry Christmas. George the little mice went about merrily singing Christmas carols. Jingle bells, jingle bells. It seems like there was a rodent dressed as Santa Claus on every corner. They rang bells and bellowed, "Merry Christmas! Happy holiday to all!" Everybody was happy. Everybody except me. Everybody was hurrying home to celebrate with their families. Everybody except me. Everybody had a place to go. Everybody except me. I'd never felt lonelier in my life. I found myself at a beautiful circle with a huge statue of Columbus at its center. At a moment, I had an idea struck me like a lightning bolt. An idea. With a new hope, I took out Mrs. A. Smith's appointment book. I looked closer at the last appointment, the one that my tear had crossed. What did Columb mean? I thought it must mean Columbia University. But it could also be Columbus Circle, one of the most famous landmarks in Manhattan. I looked around, trying to get my bearings. Yes, this was Columbus Circle. It was one of the corners of Central Park. It suddenly dawned on me that the Magmouse lived on Columbus Circle. I couldn't remember the address, but I remembered what the building looked like. I'd seen it on a photo Grandfather William had shown me. I still hated the idea of confessing my mistake to Grandfather William, but fate, he brought me right to him. So what choice did I have? The only thing to do was to find the Magmouse's building and ask for help. I walked around Columbus Circle until I finally recognized the Magmouse's building. It was an enormous skyscraper gleaming with shiny mirrors, glass doors, and brightly lit windows. Timid as a mouse, I pulled open the door. As it swung open, a gust of warm wind enveloped me. It felt so good to be in a warm place. The dormouse, a tall and muscular red, was dressed in a fancy red uniform with gold epaulets on his shoulders. With an air of superiority, he shrugged his snout in my face and asked, "Who are you?" I could hardly blame him for being so scornful. I was bag-wretched. I smelled like a garbage truck, but I tried to maintain my dignity nonetheless. "I'm the guest of Magmouse." He stared at the soggy floor, my mud-soaked clothes, the dirty bag, and the glint of desperation in my eyes. Then he snorted, "Yeah, right. The likes of you a guest of the Magmouses." I tried pleading with him. "Please, would you let the Magmouse know I'm here? My name is Sultan, Germino Sultan. I come from New Mouse City." "Germino who?" he said disdainfully. "Where's New Mouse City? I've never heard of it." "My name is Sultan, Germino Sultan," I said firmly. "I'm the publisher of Rodent's Gazette, the most famous newspaper on Mouse Island." The dormouse laughed so hard, he almost popped the shining buttons of his uniform. "You're kidding. You, the publisher of a newspaper? Then I'm the President of the United States." I took out a soggy business card. The writing was still readable, though barely. "Would you please bust the Magmouses for me?" I asked. "Thank you." He still looked suspicious, but he buzzed the Magmouses. "There's a scruffy rodent here who says he's Germino Sultan from New Mouse City. He tells you've been expecting him." But there was a pause, and then the dormouse's expression changed from scorn to shock. "You've really been expecting him? Really?" he asked. He looked me up and right in amazement. "Well, in that case, of course." The dormouse hung up the phone, then half-heartedly took his cap off the board. Mr. Sultan, this way please. Take the elevator to the 34th floor." Mrs. A. Smith. I dragged myself and the yellow bag to the elevator. I no longer cared that I lost the gifts. Not even the prospect of facing the grandfather bothered me. All I cared about now was taking a nice long bubble bath and stuffing some cheese in my snout. Not necessarily in that order. I pressed the button of 34th floor. While the elevator was going up, I started thinking about what I'd say to the McMouses and my grandfather. Finally, the elevator door opened. I found myself in an immense room decorated with elegant furniture and brightly colored Christmas decorations. It was filled with lots of smiling rodents. Among the happy faces was my grandfather. I threw myself on my knee before him. "Grandfather, please forgive me. I lost the bag with all the McMouse's gifts." My grandfather opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say a word, someone interrupted him. "What do you mean?" a pleasant-sounding voice asked. "The gifts were right here." A friendly-looking young rodent came towards me. She was carrying a yellow bag just like the one I still had clutched in my paw. Attached to the bag's handle was a bright blue tag that said Germino Stilton. It was my shoecase. It's, I stuttered. "Cheesecake." "Are you Mrs. A. Smith?" The rodent laughed. "Yes, I'm Mrs. A. Smith. And you're Germino Stilton, right?" I was almost struck speechless. "Yes, I'm Stilton, Germino Stilton," I finally answered. "What are you doing at the McMouse's house?" "I'm Annabelle McMouse Smith, Klondike McMouse's daughter," she explained. "I married Coconut Smith." A smiling rodent with dark fur approached and shook my paw. "Hi, I'm Coconut Smith, Annabelle's husband. Welcome, Germino. We've been waiting for you since this morning." I was flabbergasted. "I don't understand." "What do you mean you've been waiting for me since this morning?" my grandfather cut in. "Still daydreaming, grandson, huh? Wake up and smell the cheddar." My friend Klondike's daughter arrived home this morning, opened the shoecase and found it was not hers, but I recognized it immediately. "It was your bag. Annabelle tried calling you to tell you to come immediately to Columbus Circle." I couldn't believe it. All day long I'd been thinking I'd never find A. Smith. The Smiths was too common a name, and she'd been under my snout a long time. "Too bad the phone battery went dead when you never got the full message," my grandfather went on. "We've been waiting for you all day. You got here just in time for Christmas Eve dinner. But your appointment book had you going someplace different every hour. Why were your schedules so packed?" I asked Annabelle. She smiled. "I thought I'd take you around New York and show you some of the most interesting sights. But if it looks like you've already done that by yourself." I guess I had. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it my way to other tourists, but I certainly seen the city from the top to bottom, and now that I was nice and warm with family and friends again, I could almost laugh about it. It certainly had been an adventure. Merry Christmas to all. While the Stiltons and the McMouses were celebrating Christmas, I gazed out the enormous picture window overlooking Central Park. The snow-covered trees seemed to go on forever. It was a magical sight. Fluffy flakes danced through the air and settled gently on the newly fallen snow. Those snowflakes reminded me of home. The snow that falls on New York was the same as the snow falling over Newman City. It just goes to show the things that really matter are the same everywhere. All over the world, the herd of every mouse asks for the same thing, happiness. I turned back towards the rodent in the room. There was nothing that could make me happier than I was at the moment, with my family and friends around me. Stretching out my arms, I called out, "Merry Christmas to all of you." I turned to the McMouses. "Thank you for including us in your holiday celebration. It was wonderful to make such marvelous new friends." Then I turned to my family, and it's fabulous to be back with my family. It wouldn't be Christmas if we couldn't all be together today. I love you all. My sister and Benjamin rushed over and gave me a big hug. Even my grandfather came over me to embrace me. Holy cheese, this was turning out to be one of the best Christmas ever. The end. Thank you for reading this book. A very Merry Christmas. The end. Bye bye. And please subscribe if you like the story. Bye.